Please welcome author and journalist Eboni Williams.
Thank you. Our next guest hardly needs an introduction. During her 2 years as the American ambassador to the United States of America at the United Nations, Nikki Haley proved herself, yes, Nikki Haley proved herself a true friend of Israel and a champion of the American-Israeli relationship. She worked tirelessly to ensure that the anti-Israel bias that persists at the UN was put on its heels. And she showed and demonstrated that tenacity time and time again. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to this stage the former United States of America Ambassador to the United Nations, Ms. Nikki Haley. Fantastic.
Oh, it's so great. Thank you.
Wow.
You guys are so amazing. Thank you. Thank you. If I'm ever having a bad day, I just need to come here.
We'll just recreate it for you.
It's amazing every single time.
It's amazing.
I love you too. Thank you.
Clear to say the ambassador has some fans here. That's wonderful. Well earned. Ambassador, I want to start with the devastating breaking news, though, from this morning. Last night, Hamas launched rockets from Gaza that smashed into a home right outside of Tel Aviv, injuring a family of 7, including a toddler and an infant. Now, it seems that if a terrorist group had launched a rocket some 75 miles outside of any major city from any country in this world, the expectation would be an outpour of sympathy. It seems as if except that city is Israel, or country is Israel, rather. My question to you is this: you are uniquely positioned inside of the UN. Please help us understand what those conversations are like after a tragic attack like this. What is said, how is it contemplated, and how in this exact type of instance you were able to time and time again make sure that it was clear that the US stood with Israel in this type of event?
You know, what's interesting is that the UN, I can guarantee you this morning, it is radio silent. They are not saying anything about Hamas. They're not saying anything about the lives lost. They're not saying anything. But if it was any one of those countries, they'd be calling an emergency Security Council meeting. But this is where I want you to have hope. Because in all these years, last year for the first time, the majority of the general membership of the UN voted for a resolution that acknowledged Hamas and acknowledged the terror that they were spreading and acknowledged how bad they were. That was an amazing thing. And what we have to make sure they know is Hamas is a terrorist group that needs to be stopped, and we can't ever be quiet about it.
Quick follow-up on that, Ambassador. Why does it seem that the UN historically has focused on the Israeli response to an attack like this versus the attack itself?
I mean, it's just, you know, what I've learned is at the UN, it's just been this way for so long that they do that. But the story behind one of my meetings was I was meeting with a couple of Arab countries, and we were talking about Yemen. And one of them said, I just don't understand. why isn't anyone calling out Hezbollah? Why aren't they sitting there saying something about what's being done? All of these things that are happening because they were upset that that terrorist group was doing something they shouldn't be doing. And I turned around and I said, well, if you're upset about that, what's the difference between that and Hamas and Israel? They were stunned, but when our meeting was over, they pulled me to the side and they said, you're right. We know you're right, but we have to do this for our constituents. That's what they're doing this for. It's for sound bites for their constituents. They don't honestly think that way. It's just they've done it for so long, they do what they think they've always had to do.
It's fascinating. Looking back at your tenure, though, at the UN, you had so many of them, but please share what you feel were some of your brightest accomplishments, particularly those of concern to AIPAC here today.
Still being alive today. Surviving the UN was surviving, and I still have my heels on, by the way.
Absolutely. Fabulous.
I think that, and I hope everybody in this audience is really proud of what we accomplished at the UN. Because if we just go down the list, we got out of UNESCO, we got out of the Iran deal and pointed the finger where it needed to be pointed, which was on Iran. We got out of the Human Rights Council, which for once, now other countries are actually holding the burden and realizing they need to do something about the anti-Israel bias. We got them to acknowledge Hamas for the first time. And by the way, we moved the embassy to Jerusalem. We got the Israeli bashing session that happened every month to not sit there and just bash Israel. We actually started a conversation about what really are the issues in the Middle East, like what was happening in Yemen, like what was happening with terrorists, like what we were trying to do in all of these other countries that mattered, as opposed to it being about Israel. And I think everyone in this audience should be so proud because you pushed and you hoped and we won by doing all of those things.
Now, you just mentioned it there, the focus, the extreme focus, I'll call it, on Israel and the UN. Now, I know when you were first named ambassador, you were a bit taken aback, right, by just how incredibly narrow that focus was on Israel within the UN. Were there any particular moments of kind of strict scrutiny around Israel that stood out to you?
It was, you guys have heard me say this before. It was like everybody was bullying this kid in the corner. And it was abusive, and it was wrong, and it was just unwarranted. That was the biggest thing, is it was unwarranted. Here was, such a strong democracy sitting in a neighborhood that's so dangerous. And in any other situation, you'd be lifting that country up and having their back. And instead, they were kicking them. And so, really when you see something like that, whether it's Israel or anything else, you have to stand up and fight. You have to stand up and fight for those that don't think they can stand up for themselves. You look at Israel now, Israel's alive and kicking, and they're going to continue to do that.
Ambassador, what do you think the motivation is? Why is there such reluctancy to have some sense of fairness and balance when it comes to Israel and the UN?
I think this goes back to after the 1967 war. I think that everyone suddenly realized that Israel couldn't be defeated. And what that meant was they had to go after them diplomatically. And so all of the Arab countries led the charge on going after them diplomatically. And because of their influence, because of the oil, because of so many other reasons, other countries felt the need to follow them. And that is why, towards the end, we absolutely called out the Arab countries on what they were doing. And we need to keep doing that. Because at the end of the day, I don't know that they believe this anymore. I think they've done it because they always have. But even you could see the embarrassment. You could see the fact none of the countries wanted to be called out. You could see the fact that they were actually looking in the mirror. And I think we just can't let up on that.
Well taken. I want to talk about Iran, because it's crystal clear to everybody in this room that they have been ratcheting up the aggression every day. What do you think that America, that our allies in Europe and beyond really need to be doing, Ambassador, to respond to this hyper-aggression from Iran?
I think we have to isolate Iran like we isolated North Korea. Because they're one and the same. They're doing the same thing. They're suppressing their people. They're building up their military weapons. I mean, we have to separate them and make them feel isolated. And I think we did that by getting out of the Iran deal. I think the Europeans are starting to realize that that's not going to be sustainable, and they're going to have to come up with another option. I think we need to stop with the waivers. If you are doing business with Iran, I mean, you want to talk about BDS? If you are doing business with Iran, that's who we should be talking about in terms of a country that we don't want to have any companies do business with.
Finally, I want to know what you're up to right now. I know you started an amazing organization called Stand for America. Tell us a bit about it.
Well, first, I want to thank you for having me, even after the fact that I'm not ambassador anymore. I love you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, I mean, one, thank you for having me back at your party. I love being here. You know, the second thing is I'm learning how to Uber, and it's been interesting. You know, my kids are so embarrassed because when I finally get to my destination, I'm just sitting there, and the driver's like, "Do you need anything?" And I'm like, "No, I'm waiting for someone to open the door." How embarrassing is that? It is like so embarrassing. So I'm learning how to kind of do other things, but I'm doing some speaking. I'm doing some writing. A book is coming, so that will definitely be something I'm looking forward to. And I launched a platform, and I would so love if every single one of you would go on to www.standforamericanow.com and join, because I'm too young to stop fighting. I'm just not going to stop fighting. It's in my blood. This allows me to continue fighting for all the things I care about. It allows me to continue having a voice on the things that I think matter. And I'm not going anywhere. I mean, just because I left the UN, my husband will tell you, I'm still loud and proud, and will continue to fight every single day.
Amen.
But I do want to end on one note, because after coming out of the UN, there's something that I think is very important to everybody. The way the political atmosphere is right now, it's so toxic. It's so toxic. And you know how you know it's toxic? Is because if you put a good piece of legislation on the table, everybody wants to know whose it is first before they decide whether to support it. That's wrong. Political parties now see each other as evil.
Yeah.
And they're not evil, because I've seen evil. I've seen in Democratic Republic of Congo where the military comes in, and I've heard women who've said they've taken their babies and thrown them in fires. I've been to South Sudan where they use rape as a weapon of war. I've watched as Assad has killed innocent children with chemical weapons. I stood on the bridge outside of Venezuela where the average adult has lost 24 pounds trying to cross over that bridge in the hot sun just to get the one meal they're going to have that day. That's evil. What we have are issues. But those aren't evil. They're just our opponents. It's just policy. And on our worst day, America has so much to be blessed for. Every one of us should feel blessed every single day. So, like, stop the finger pointing and stop the fighting, and let's get some things done. But remind everyone that we are blessed, be grateful about it, and never stop using the power of your voice, because it matters. It really does matter.
I'm going to say amen to that.
Thank you.
And from one Carolina woman to another one, I want to say thank you on behalf of everybody in this room for your commitment to the United States of America and Israel's relationship, and for your overall leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Nikki Haley.